My daughter, the self-made social media star, saw me as her silent benefactor. A quiet, simple-minded widow who was good for a check but an embarrassment at a party. At her lavish 21st birthday celebration, she publicly thanked me by telling me to get out of her life. Her friends cheered her brave declaration of independence. She thought she was cutting ties with her boring mother. She had no idea she was actually firing the secret, anonymous founder of the firm that owned her car, her apartment, and her entire brand. She didn't just ask me to leave her life. She gave me the permission I needed to dismantle it. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. The performance was, I had to admit, flawless. My daughter, Morgan, stood in the center of a softly lit ballroom in one of Ballantyne's most exclusive event spaces, a vision in a shimmering rose gold dress. She was 21 tonight and she was holding court. The room was filled with her people, a vibrant, beautiful, and ambitious crowd of young Charlotte's rising stars. There were budding entrepreneurs, social media influencers with hundreds of thousands of followers, and the impossibly cool children of the city's New South elite. They orbited Morgan like planets around a sun, their faces upturned, their phones held high, capturing every moment for their own carefully curated feeds. From my position near the back of the room, by a table laden with untouched champagne flutes, I was an invisible star, a ghost in a sensible navy blue dress. To this crowd, I was simply Morgan's mom, a quiet, unassuming widow who had, presumably, provided the genetic material and then faded gracefully into the background. They saw a simple woman, perhaps a bit dowdy, who didn't quite fit in with the glittering, high-octane energy of the room. They had no idea that I owned the room, the building it was in, and the private equity firm that held the mortgage on it. They saw a checkbook, not a queen. And for 21 years that had been by design. Morgan was in her element. She moved through the crowd with the easy, magnetic charisma of a natural-born leader. She was the founder of Morgan May, a lifestyle brand that was, in her own words, a testament to the power of the self-made woman. Her brand was her identity. Her Instagram was a mosaic of inspirational quotes, beautifully staged photos of her hustle, and partnerships with trendy, up-and-coming brands. She was, by all accounts, a success story, a young, independent boss who had built an empire through sheer grit and a savvy understanding of the digital marketplace. It was a beautiful, compelling narrative. And it was a complete and utter lie. I was the ghostwriter of her success. The luxury apartment she called the Morgan May headquarters? I paid the rent. The sleek white Tesla she drove. A 21st birthday gift from me, delivered a week early. The high-end camera equipment, the designer wardrobe that was her brand uniform, the very seed money she had used to launch her business. It had all come from me. It flowed from a series of accounts I had set up, a quiet, steady river of capital that fueled her self-made journey. She saw it as a trust fund, a passive, magical wellspring of money that was simply her due. She had no idea that it was an active investment, a discretionary fund that I alone controlled. As the night wore on, I played my part. I smiled politely at her friends, who looked through me with the polite indifference of youth. I spoke with the caterer, the event planner, and the DJ, discreetly settling the final payments with a tap of my credit card. Morgan, of course, was too busy being celebrated to concern herself with such mundane details. She was the visionary, the star. I was merely the executive producer, the silent, invisible money behind the scenes. It was a role I had chosen, a role I had believed was an act of love. I had wanted her to build her own life, to find her own path, without the long, complicated shadow of my own success. I had built a global investment firm, Mayweath Capital, from the ground up after my husband's death, a quiet, anonymous powerhouse in the world of finance. I had kept it a secret from her, wanting her to feel the thrill of her own achievements. I had not realized that in giving her the fruits of my labor without the context of the work, I had not given her a head start. I had given her a handicap. I had taught her the language of success, but not the grammar of sacrifice. The climax of the evening arrived, as it always does, with the toasts. Her boyfriend, Bryce, a handsome, equally image-conscious young man, went first. He spoke of her drive, her vision, her inspiring journey. He called her a force of nature, a self-made icon for her generation. He raised his glass to the most authentic person I know. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Then it was Morgan's turn. She stepped onto the small, raised platform, her smile radiant, her confidence absolute. She thanked her friends, her followers, her brand partners. She spoke of her journey, of the struggles, of the hustle. And then she turned her bright, beautiful smile on me, standing in the shadows at the back of the room. And finally, she said, her voice ringing with a clear, confident tone that carried across the suddenly silent room, I want to thank my mom. A few people turned to look at me, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and pity. I felt a faint, hopeful flutter in my chest. Perhaps this was it. The moment of acknowledgement, of gratitude. Thanks, Mom, she said, her smile widening as she raised her glass. Thanks for the car and the college funds. She paused, letting the moment hang in the air, a perfect dramatic beat. But if you really want to make me happy, she continued, her voice now laced with a sharp, dismissive edge, just stay out of my life. The room erupted. Not in shocked silence, but in a wave of laughter, cheers, and applause. Her friends, her followers, her boyfriend, they were cheering for her. They saw it as a declaration of independence, a bold, final severing of the cord from her simple, unambitious past. They saw a boss making a power move. They did not see a daughter's casual, public, and devastatingly cruel repudiation of her own mother. I stood there, frozen in the back of the room, the sound of their applause washing over me like a wave of acid. My face remained a calm, unreadable mask, a habit learned over years of high-stakes negotiations. But behind the mask something inside me broke. The quiet, hopeful flutter in my chest died, and in its place, a cold, hard, and unfamiliar resolve began to form. I had spent my life building things, a marriage, a business, a family, and now I realized it was time to tear something down. The performance was over. The lie was about to end. I did not stay for the rest of the party. No one noticed my departure. I slipped out a side door, a ghost leaving her own haunting, and drove home to my quiet, elegant house in Myers Park. The house was a reflection of me, understated, comfortable, and filled with a quiet strength. Morgan had always hated it. She called it old-fashioned and stuffy, a relic from a bygone era. She failed to see that its solid, traditional foundation was precisely what gave it its enduring value. It was a lesson she was about to learn, in the most brutal way imaginable. I walked into my home office, a room she had always dismissed as the place where I paid bills and did online shopping. I sat down at my large mahogany desk, the one piece of furniture I had kept from my husband's study, and I began the process of my own disappearance. I did not weep. My grief was a cold, efficient engine fueling my actions with a clarity that was absolute. My first and only call was to Marcus Cole. Marcus was the public face of Mayweath Capital, the brilliant 38-year-old managing partner I had hired and mentored a decade ago. He was the son I never had, a man of fierce intelligence and even fiercer loyalty. He knew the entire story, and for years he had silently and respectfully watched Morgan's casual, thoughtless disrespect. He answered on the second ring, his voice professional and alert, even at this late hour. "Lena," he said, a note of concern in his voice. "Is everything all right?" "No, Marcus," I said, my voice as calm and steady as a surgeon's hand. "It is not. But it's about to be." I took a breath. "It's time. Shut it all down." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, but it was not a silence of confusion. It was a silence of understanding, of a soldier receiving a long-awaited command. "All of it?" he asked, his voice low. "All of it," I confirmed. "The discretionary accounts, the credit lines, the apartment lease, the car payments, everything that flows from me to her. Turn off the tap. As of this moment, Morgan May is no longer a subsidiary of this firm. Consider it done," he said, his voice a low, satisfying promise of action. "What are your instructions for me?" "You are now the gatekeeper," I said. "She will eventually find her way to you. When she does, you have my permission to show her the truth. All of it. And Marcus, show no mercy." "Understood," he said. And that was that. The first, most critical domino had been pushed. Next, I moved to my own life. I logged into my personal accounts, my social media, my email, and I began to delete. I erased every photo, every post, every digital trace of my existence. I was a ghost in the machine, and I was exorcising myself. I then took my phone, my personal laptop and my wallet and I placed them in a small fireproof safe. I took the single key to that safe, placed it in a plain manila envelope and wrote Marcus's office address on the front. Finally I packed one large suitcase filled with simple practical clothes, a few good books, and the one framed photo of my late husband that I kept on my desk. I walked through the silent, beautiful house, a house filled with the ghosts of a life my daughter had so casually discarded, and I felt not a pang of sadness. I felt only a cold, liberating sense of purpose. By morning, as the sun began to cast its first pale light over the tree-lined streets of Myers Park, I was gone. The house was locked, the security system was armed. The envelope with the key was in a FedEx drop box on its way to Marcus. My car was in long-term parking at the Charlotte Douglas International Airport. I had purchased a one-way ticket to a small, quiet coastal town in a state where no one knew my name. My phone was disconnected. My accounts were invisible. Lena Mayweather, the simple, unassuming widow, had ceased to exist. In her place was a woman my daughter had never met, a woman she was about to learn to fear and then perhaps to respect. For the first few days, Morgan's world was a sun-drenched paradise of her own making. She woke up in her luxurious South End apartment, the silence of her mother's absence a welcome, liberating sound. There were no quiet, judgmental sighs over the credit card bills left on the counter. No gentle, probing questions about her business plan. There was only freedom. She and Bryce celebrated her newfound independence with a long champagne-fueled brunch, toasting to her courage and her bold new chapter. "I'm so proud of you, babe," Bryce had said, his eyes shining with an admiration that was as shallow as it was sincere. "That was a boss move. You have to cut toxic ties if you want to grow. Everyone knows that." Morgan had posted a picture of their clinking champagne glasses to her Instagram story, with a caption that read, "Choose your family. Choose your future. #unapologetic, #selfmade, #boss." The post had received thousands of likes, her followers flooding the comments with praise for her bravery and her authenticity. She was not just a lifestyle brand, she was a movement. And she was the fearless leader. She spent the week in a blissful, productive haze. She filmed content for her YouTube channel, a series on building your brand from the ground up. She took meetings with potential collaborators, her confidence soaring. She felt lighter, more focused, unburdened by the heavy, invisible weight of her mother's disapproval. She truly believed that by publicly severing the tie, she had unlocked a new level of her own potential. She was Morgan May, the self-made woman, and her future was a bright, limitless horizon. She had everything she had ever wanted and she had gotten it, she believed, all on her own. The first crack in the foundation of her perfect, self-made world appeared exactly 1 week after the party. It was a small hairline fracture, but it was a sign of the catastrophic earthquake to come. An email arrived from the event planning company that had orchestrated her lavish birthday party. It was a polite, professional reminder that the final 5-figure payment for the venue, catering and staff was now due. Morgan had rolled her eyes at the email. Details. She logged into the online banking portal for the account her mother had always kept funded for her, the account she thought of as her operating budget. She had always assumed it was a trust fund, a passive, endlessly replenishing well of money that was simply part of her inheritance. She had never once bothered to look at a statement to understand the source of the funds. She simply spent and the money was always there. She entered the payment details, clicked confirm, and waited for the satisfying notification that the transfer was complete. Instead, a message flashed on the screen in stark red letters. Payment declined. Insufficient funds. She frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. A glitch in the system, surely. She tried again. Payment declined. She checked the account balance. The number that stared back at her was a shock. $17.32. The annoyance curdled into a cold, sharp spike of panic. It had to be a mistake. A bank error. Or perhaps her mother, in a fit of petty, childish pique, had temporarily frozen the account. It was infuriating, but it was manageable. She would deal with it later. For now, the bill had to be paid. The event planner was a key contact in the Charlotte social scene. A late payment would be a mark of unprofessionalism she could not afford. With a sigh of frustration, she pulled out her personal American Express card, the one she kept for emergencies. She had always paid it off in full each month with funds from the trust. She entered the card number and paid the bill, the large charge eating up nearly every dollar of her available credit. The card was now, for all intents and purposes, maxed out. But the problem was solved. The fire was out. She pushed the unsettling incident to the back of her mind, attributing it to her mother's passive-aggressive theatrics. It was a temporary inconvenience, a final, desperate attempt to make a point. She had no idea that it was not the end of the drama. It was the beginning of the demolition. The hairline fracture became a gaping chasm 2 days later. An email arrived from the management company of her luxury apartment building. Her automatic rent payment for the first of the month had been rejected. The rent was now 5 days past due, and if it was not paid in full within 24 hours, eviction proceedings would begin. The panic was no longer a spike. It was a cold, flooding tide. She tried to call her mother, her fingers jabbing at the screen with a frantic, angry energy. The call didn't go through. A sterile, automated voice informed her that the number she had dialed had been disconnected. She tried again, thinking she had misdialed. Disconnected. She sent a flurry of angry, demanding texts. They all failed to deliver. A new, more terrifying thought began to dawn on her. This was not a temporary freeze. This was not a passive-aggressive gesture. This was a disappearance. Her mother was gone, and she had taken the money with her. The unraveling accelerated, each new piece of information a fresh blow to her crumbling reality. She received a certified letter from the dealership that leased her the Tesla. The automatic payments had been cancelled. The car was to be returned within 48 hours, or it would be reported stolen and repossessed. The corporate credit cards she used to fund her brand's expenses, the software subscriptions, the freelance graphic designers, the online advertising, were all declined one by one. The entire financial infrastructure of her life, a structure she had believed she had built herself, was collapsing. She finally understood the devastating truth. Her life was not funded by a passive, independent trust fund. It was an active, ongoing expense paid for in real time by a person. A person who had, without a word of warning, simply stopped paying. She was not the CEO of a self-made empire. She was a dependent, a 30-day to 30-day liability, and her sole benefactor had just vanished into thin air. The illusion of her freedom, the carefully constructed narrative of her self-made success, had been a lie. And she was now facing the terrifying, unfiltered consequences of that lie, alone. The panic was a physical thing, a cold, metallic taste in the back of her throat. For 3 days, Morgan had tried to function, to maintain the facade of the calm, confident boss babe for her online audience. But behind the scenes, her world was in a state of free fall. She had tried every avenue to find her mother. She had called her mother's friends, who had all responded with a cool, polite ignorance. She had driven to her mother's house in Myers Park, only to find it locked and empty, a security system keypad blinking a silent, impassive red light. Her mother had not just left, she had evaporated. Desperation was a powerful motivator. It stripped away the layers of pride and arrogance, leaving only the raw, primal instinct to survive. Morgan, the woman who had dismissed her mother's home as a stuffy, irrelevant museum, was now standing on the back patio, using a rock to smash a small pane of glass in the kitchen door. The sound of the shattering glass was a violation, an admission of her own powerlessness. She reached a trembling hand through the broken pane, unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was silent, still and unervingly clean. It looked as if its owner had just stepped out for an afternoon errand, not vanished from the face of the earth. Morgan walked through the familiar rooms, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She was not looking for her mother anymore. She was looking for answers. She was looking for money. She made a beeline for the home office, the room she had always ignored, the room where she assumed her mother did nothing more important than pay the electric bill. She began to tear the room apart, her movements frantic and clumsy. She rifled through the desk drawers, pulling out files and papers, searching for anything that looked like a bank statement, a stock certificate, a will. But there was nothing. The files were meticulously organized, but they contained only the mundane records of a simple middle-class life. Old tax returns, appliance warranties, paid-off utility bills. There was no evidence of the vast hidden wealth that had been funding her own extravagant existence. It was as if the money that had defined her life had left no paper trail. She was about to give up, to sink to the floor in a heap of frustrated, tearful defeat, when her hand brushed against a small lacquered box on the corner of the desk. It was a simple, elegant box, one she had seen 1,000 times but never paid any attention to. She opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was not jewelry or cash, but a small, neat stack of business cards. They were all identical. The paper was thick and expensive, the font a clean, classic serif. The card read, Marcus Cole, Managing Partner, Mayweath Capital. The name meant nothing to her. She had never heard her mother mention a Marcus Cole, let alone a Mayweath Capital. She assumed he was some small-time financial advisor, a local accountant who managed her mother's modest retirement fund. He was a long shot, a pathetic, flimsy lead in a case that was growing colder by the second. But he was the only lead she had. She took one of the cards, her fingers leaving a smudge on its pristine surface, and walked out of the silent, empty house, the broken glass on the kitchen floor a testament to her desperation. Securing a meeting with Marcus Cole proved to be more difficult than she had anticipated. The woman who answered the phone at Mayweath Capital had a voice that was as crisp and cool as a winter morning. She informed Morgan that Mr. Cole's schedule was booked for the next 3 months, and that he did not, as a rule, take unsolicited meetings. Morgan, used to doors opening for her, was stunned. She tried to drop her own name, the name she believed carried weight in this city. "This is Morgan May," she had said, her voice full of a confidence she did not feel. "It's a personal matter." The assistant was unimpressed. "I'm sorry, I don't have a Morgan May on my client list, miss," she had replied, her tone suggesting that Morgan was a slightly annoying insect she was about to swat away. It was only when Morgan, in a final desperate gambit, had mentioned her mother's name that the tone had shifted. "It's regarding Lena Mayweath," she had said, the name feeling strange in her own mouth. There was a pause on the other end of the line and then, "Please hold." A moment later the assistant was back, her voice now devoid of any warmth, but with a new, chilling efficiency. "Mr. Cole can see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Do not be late." The address she gave was for one of the newest, most prestigious glass towers in the heart of Charlotte's financial district. When Morgan walked into the lobby the next day, her carefully chosen boss babe outfit of a sharp blazer and designer jeans suddenly felt cheap and inadequate. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth and power, all gleaming marble, dark wood, and silent, intimidating security guards. The offices of Mayweath Capital were on the top floor. The elevator opened into a reception area that was larger than her entire apartment. The view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows was breathtaking. This was not the office of a small-time accountant. This was the headquarters of a major financial player. A man was waiting for her. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than her car, and he radiated an aura of calm, absolute authority. He was Marcus Cole. He did not smile. He did not offer to shake her hand. He simply looked at her, his eyes cold, professional, and utterly, completely unimpressed. "Miss May," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone. "Thank you for coming. Please follow me." He led her not to a small, cluttered office, but to a vast, silent conference room. A large, digital screen covered one wall. He gestured for her to sit at the long, polished table, and then took a seat at its head. The power dynamic was clear. She was not a client. She was not a peer. She was a supplicant and he was the king. "I understand you have some questions regarding your mother," he began, his voice devoid of any emotion. "I have been authorized by her to provide you with some answers." The words, "authorized by her," hit Morgan like a physical blow. Her mother was not missing. She was in control. This entire terrifying ordeal was not an accident. It was a plan. And this man, this cold, powerful stranger, was her mother's general. With Lena's remote permission, which he had obtained via a single encrypted text message just moments before Morgan's arrival, Marcus began the systematic, brutal annihilation of Morgan May's identity. He did not raise his voice. He did not use emotional language. He simply presented the facts, his tone as detached and clinical as a surgeon describing a terminal diagnosis. He began by pressing a button on a remote. The large screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying the organizational chart of Mayweath Capital. It was a vast, complex web of holding companies, investment funds, and international subsidiaries. And at the very top, in a simple, elegant box, were 2 words: Lena Mayweath, founder and so. Morgan stared at the screen, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. That's not possible, she stammered. My mother, she's a widow. She lives in Myers Park. She pays bills. Marcus's expression did not change. Your mother, he said, his voice as cold as steel, is one of the most respected and successful private equity investors in the country. She founded this firm 15 years ago after your father's death, with the insurance money you so casually dismiss. She has built it into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. She has kept her involvement anonymous for personal reasons. Reasons, I believe, that have to do with you. He clicked the remote again. The screen changed, displaying a new diagram. It was a flowchart, a dizzying series of lines and arrows that all originated from a single box labeled LM Discretionary Fund. From that box, arrows pointed to other boxes: UNC tuition payments, South End apartment lease, Tesla Motors lease agreement, American Express corporate accounts. And at the very bottom, a box that made the air leave Morgan's lungs in a painful rush. Morgan May, seed funding. Your entire life, Miss May, Marcus continued, his voice a relentless, factual hammer, has been a wholly owned subsidiary of your mother's firm. Your education, your housing, your transportation, your self-made brand, every single penny was a discretionary expenditure, personally approved and funded by the woman you so publicly discarded. You are not a boss. You are not self-made. You are, and have always been, your mother's single most expensive and, until recently, most beloved investment. He clicked the remote one last time. The screen now showed a simple, stark line graph. It was the balance of the LM Discretionary Fund. It showed a steady, consistent outflow of funds for years, and then on the date of her 21st birthday, the line plummeted to zero. The truth, in all its devastating, humiliating clarity, was undeniable. Her entire identity was a fraud. Her success was a lie. Her independence was a fantasy. She was a product, a brand that had been created and funded by the very woman she had scorned. She had not built an empire. She had been a child playing with her mother's toys in a very expensive sandbox. The annihilation was complete. Morgan sat there, stripped bare in the cold, silent conference room, the ruins of her identity scattered around her like shattered glass. The confident, charismatic influencer was gone, replaced by a pale, trembling young woman on the verge of complete collapse. She began to weep, not the performative tears of her birthday party, but deep, ragged, soul-crushing sobs of a person who has just discovered that their entire life is a lie. Marcus watched her, his expression unmoved. He let her cry for a full minute before he spoke again, his voice as unforgiving as before. Your mother anticipated that this might be your reaction, he said, as if commenting on a predictable market fluctuation. I need to talk to her, Morgan finally choked out, the words a desperate, broken plea. Please. I need to apologize. I need to see her. That will not be possible, Marcus stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Your mother has made it very clear that she will not be seeing you or speaking to you. She has cut off all personal contact. The emotional and financial investment in Morgan May has been written off as a loss. The words were a fresh stab of pain, a brutal confirmation of her own monstrousness. She had not just been cut off financially, she had been cut off emotionally. She had been written off. The thought was more terrifying than any amount of debt. Then what am I supposed to do? She whispered, her voice a raw, ragged sound. I have nothing. I have nowhere to go. That is not entirely true, Marcus said, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Your mother, despite her disappointment, believes that every investment, even a failed one, deserves one final chance to prove its potential value. She has authorized me to present you with a single, non-negotiable path forward. He slid a thin folder across the polished table. Morgan opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single piece of paper. It was an application form. Mayweath Capital runs a highly competitive, unpaid summer internship program, Marcus explained, his voice as dry as dust. It is designed for college students who wish to learn the business from the ground up. The program begins in the mailroom. Sorting mail, making copies, delivering packages. It is grueling, thankless, and intensely demanding work. We receive over 1,000 applications for 10 spots each year. He stood up, his tall frame looming over her. Your mother has instructed me that if you wish to understand the world she built, the world that funded your entire existence and perhaps one day earn a place in it, your application will be considered alongside the others. The deadline is Friday. The ultimatum was a perfect, brutal inversion of her own. She had offered her mother a role, nanny. Her mother was now offering her a role, intern. She had told her mother to stay out of her life. Her mother was now offering her a tiny, conditional and deeply humiliating way back in. He walked to the door of the conference room and held it open. My assistant will validate your parking, he said, his voice a final, chilling dismissal. The weeks that followed were a brutal, systematic dismantling of a life. The eviction notice arrived, cold and final. The Tesla was repossessed from her apartment's parking garage in the dead of night. Bryce, her adoring, ambitious boyfriend, disappeared the moment he realized the money was gone. His loyalty, it turned out, was directly correlated to her net worth. Her brand, without the constant infusion of cash to pay for advertising, collaborations and content creation, withered and died. Her followers, sensing the shift from aspirational glamour to desperate reality, began to drift away. Morgan, the self-made icon, was bankrupt. She sold her designer clothes to consignment shops, her high-end furniture on Facebook Marketplace, her camera equipment to a pawn shop. She moved out of her luxury apartment and into a tiny sublet room in a shared house near the university, a room that was smaller than her former walk-in closet. She was 21 years old and she was starting her life over from absolute zero. She spent days in a fog of shame and regret, the full weight of her actions, of her casual public cruelty pressing down on her. She replayed the moment of her birthday toast over and over in her mind, her own words a source of constant, searing torment. She had not just been arrogant, she had been a fool. She had thrown away a love she had not understood, a fortune she had not earned, and a mother she had never truly known. On Friday, the day of the deadline, she walked out of her small, borrowed room and took the city bus downtown. She walked into the gleaming, intimidating lobby of Mayweath Capital, not in a designer blazer, but in a simple black dress she had bought at a thrift store. She did not look like an influencer or a CEO. She looked like what she was, a young woman who had lost everything. She handed her completed application to the cool, professional receptionist. It was an act of complete and total surrender, an admission of her own profound failure. It was the most difficult, most humiliating, and most honest thing she had ever done. She turned and walked out of the building with no idea if she would ever be invited back. But as she stepped out into the bright, unforgiving sunlight of the city, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Amidst the shame and the fear, there was a tiny, fragile flicker of hope. She had lost her brand, her boyfriend, and her fortune. But she had perhaps just taken the first painful step toward finding herself. She got the email a week later. The subject line was simple: Mayweath Capital Internship Program. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she opened it. The letter was short, formal, and to the point. She had been accepted. Her start date was the following Monday. Her assignment, the mailroom. The first day of her new life was a study in humility. She woke before dawn in her small, cramped room, put on a simple, professional outfit that was a universe away from her old, curated style, and took the bus to the financial district. She walked into the gleaming lobby of Mayweath Capital, a building that had once been the site of her greatest humiliation, and took the elevator not to the top floor but to the sub-basement. The mailroom was a brightly lit, windowless space, filled with the hum of sorting machines and the scent of paper and toner. It was a world away from the hushed, carpeted executive suites above. Her supervisor was a no-nonsense woman who had been with the company for 20 years, and she made it clear that Morgan would receive no special treatment. Her new identity was not Morgan May, the influencer, or even Lena Mayweath's daughter. It was Morgan, the intern. Her days were a blur of monotonous, physically demanding work. She sorted incoming mail, she pushed heavy carts from department to department, she operated the complex, industrial-sized copy machines. She learned the names of every employee in the building, from the top executives to the cleaning staff. She was a ghost, a silent, anonymous cog in the massive, powerful machine her mother had built. Her old life, the life of brunches and brand deals and endless self-promotion, felt like a dream from another lifetime. This was her new reality. The smell of ink, the weight of a mail cart, the quiet satisfaction of a day of honest, unglamorous work. She did not complain. She did not slack off. She poured every ounce of her energy into the job. She was the first to arrive and the last to leave. She learned the complex internal mail codes. She organized the chaotic supply closets. She did the work and she did it well. It was a form of penance, a way to atone for the sins of her past life. She was no longer building a brand, she was building a character. 6 months passed. The seasons changed. Morgan was no longer the new intern. She was a fixture in the mailroom, a quiet, reliable presence. She had made a few tentative friendships with the other support staff, people whose lives were a universe away from her old, privileged circle. She had learned to live on her meager intern stipend, to budget, to cook for herself, to find joy in small, simple things. The shame was still there, a constant low-grade hum beneath the surface of her new life. But it was now joined by something else, a quiet, fragile sense of pride. She was standing on her own 2 feet for the first time in her life. One evening, as she was preparing to leave for the day, she found a plain white envelope on the small, cluttered desk she used in the mailroom. It was addressed to her in a familiar, elegant handwriting that made her heart stop. It was her mother's. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside there was no long, emotional letter, no words of forgiveness or recrimination. There was only a single silver key attached to a simple fob, and a small, folded note written on her mother's personal stationery. She unfolded the note. It contained only 2 short sentences. A CEO needs to understand every part of the business. Keep going. It was signed simply. Tears streamed down Morgan's face, but for the first time in a long time, they were not tears of shame or self-pity. They were tears of a profound, overwhelming gratitude. She looked at the key in her hand. It was, she knew, a key to a modest, simple apartment, a safe place to land. It was not a handout. It was an acknowledgement. It was a signal that her mother was watching, that her hard work had been seen, that her penance had been accepted. It was not forgiveness. It was not a restoration of her old life. But it was a beginning. It was the first tentative step on the long, hard road back to a mother she was only just beginning to understand, and a future she would now have to earn.